Morning, guys. Finally going to get around to making that injection pump video off that Massey that I said I'd make. So let's get into it. So this is basically your, it's pretty standard on a lot of older tractors. This one in particular is off of a 93 Massey Ferguson 283. And it's what you call a CAV DPA. And the CAV stands for the guy who made the company, whose name was Charles Anthony Vandervelde, and then eventually it got bought out by Lucas, but they put these in a lot of different things. So anyway, I already did a little bit of work on it. So this is basically your top cover. So this here would end up going up through your top cover, and this is what controls your throttle, and then this one here is what controls your metering valve, which is this guy here. And this is basically what allows fuel to flow into the actual pump, or there's this little stop lever, which will basically, it's kind of hard to do with the camera, forgive me, will slide right into here, and then this little tit right here slides in that notch, and then when you pull on your stop lever, it will move this forwards or backwards, which basically will not allow the metering valve to open or close. So if you remember, we had some issues where we got water into this pump, or into the whole fuel system actually, and what the issue was is that once in a while it would not want to start. Well, as you can see here, your governor plate, when the governor plate moves, that metering valve should open and close, but it's getting stuck, and I suspect it's because it's got water in it and it's starting to get pitted or rusty or who knows. So we're going to take it apart and figure out why it's doing that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so just like that, with the magic of video editing, this whole pump is tore apart already. I mean, realistically, it only took me, 10-15 minutes or so, but I've done a few of these now. The only thing I have not taken apart yet is this whole pump assembly, because believe it or not, even though you've got this huge case and all these other parts, this is actually what does all the work. So you basically there's basically two sides of this. Here on this back side, you have the actual transfer pump. And you can see there's a little hole down in the middle there, and then you have this plate, which will go in here, and then you have like these little fins, I guess you would call them, and you just put them in like a cross. Bear with me here. It's a little difficult with one hand. Okay. Just like that. Okay, and then on the back side of this, you'll have your fuel inlet, which I actually don't have at the moment. I forgot it at the guy's shop, but that's really simple. And I'll do a quick thing on that. But basically, there's a little tit on the end of that fuel inlet that will connect to here. And then when the fuel comes into there, this is spinning around, and it basically takes the fuel and it sends it in through that little hole, and through these fins it'll actually push it into here, which this is the actual pump itself. These right here, these little cams, if you can see them right here, these are actually what are, those are what does the work. But let me take this thing apart and then I'll do a little bit more extensive video on that, because basically that works in conjunction with the cam here in order to create your fuel pressure, which then comes back up through a different port out these here, which go to the lines, then to your injectors. And then just quick here on the inside of this thing, I don't know how well you can see it. See if I can turn the light on a minute. So you can see there was a lot of water in this thing. So back in there, those are your flyweights, which is part of your governor assembly. I don't generally take those out unless you're replacing a weight, but if you do, one thing I've always been told about these, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, is you have this little clip here, or C-clip, that this has to go back in the exact same spot that it's in now, otherwise the cam and then the pump will not fit like it's supposed to. So usually, since I'm cleaning these out with some harder solvents, you know, like brake clean or mineral spirits or whatever, I'll just take like a scratch awl, and I'll just scratch 2 marks on the end of where the clips ride, and then put it back in, and that's if I go to take it out. Anyway, so I'm not going to take it out though, I'm just going to clean it out as is. I don't really see any need to do that. All the flyweights and everything look pretty good. And basically what those flyweights do is you've got your drive, which will actually, this sits on the front here, and then it goes into your flyweights, and then this is what your gear actually gets bolted to this here. And then as the engine rotates, basically these weights come out. So they'll come out like this against the case, and then you have this little governor plate that will sit, it sits in a little slot with those flyweights, and then what that does is that controls, let's see if I can do it with one hand here, it basically controls, if this was all together correctly, it would just move, and like it would open and close this metering valve, which basically lets fuel in or out based on throttle. But the reason why you have to have that is because those flyweights, like I said, they act as a governor, and it will limit the amount of fuel, so that way you cannot overspeed the pump and then cause too much damage. So this is that metering valve that I was talking about before, and this is the whole issue. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but those 2 little black score marks at the very end there, focus, are enough to cause it to stick. So I've got some 600 grit emery cloth here. We'll get that all cleaned up, and then when I take this apart as well, we'll clean up that metering valve hole, which I believe is this one right here, and yeah, get all the water out of it, clean it up, put it back together, and get this thing running today. Okay, so this pump's all tore apart now. And basically I'm just trying to clean everything out really good, because water in injection components like this is super bad. The water molecule will not compress like the diesel fuel will. So if you run it like this, basically what happens is that when you try to compress that water molecule, the water molecule will actually just like explode, and what it does is it starts to cavitate the internal parts on these, and then eventually, if you do it too long, number one, it probably won't run at all, but if you keep trying, it's just gonna ruin this pump. And you don't want that, because for about 24 bucks you can get a whole new reseal kit, take this thing all apart and clean it. So what I normally do is I'll just take some brake clean, and then I just create like a couple little bends inside and on the nozzle there, and then there's that hole. That hole in the center is where all of the fuel basically comes in and out for this pump. And then what I do is, I'll get this thing hooked up here a second. Maybe someday I'll have a real camera, but for now I'm just doing it with my phone. And you can see it's not really doing a whole lot of anything, but if I turn this thing just right, see, now you can see that I'm spraying fuel out the port, right? Well, so basically what I'll do is I'll just spray brake clean as I turn this thing around, and then to clean out all the ports, so it'll, go here and here and etc., just to get all of the crappy diesel fuel and the water out of this thing. So then you have these little, to be honest, I actually don't know what they're called. I'll just call them pins, like fuel pins, I guess. And they slide right in these holes here. Right in there. They're a very, very precise fit. They're a big pain in the butt to try and get in there correctly, because it's just such a tight tolerance. Let me try and get those in there a second. Alright, so I got those little fuel pins back in there. It's a big pain in the butt. And I'm not going to take it apart again, because it's a pain. Everything's pretty finicky. Anyway, so you can see here, these are what I was telling you, that these are called like your cam followers, and you can see how they've got to be opposite of each other. Here, let's do this one here. So you can see there's a little ring at the bottom here, that guy, and then inside, see if we get it to focus, you can see there's like a little groove basically that this will ride in, right? So you stuff this thing down in here, make sure it's flush with the top, and then make sure it's opposite of the other cam follower, and then you install this plate. Now this is what actually adjusts your fuel setting. So you can move these things all the way out. So you can see, oh, let me turn this light off here. That those are pushed all the way out right now, because it's at its max fuel setting right now. And that's because this little plate has to ride in that little slot on both sides here, and that's what actually turns the ring at the bottom of the cam follower, and that allows movement for like how far it can go out. So if I turn this ring all the way in like this, you can see it does not allow those followers to go out near as far. So this would be your minimum fuel setting, and then here is your maximum, because it allows those to go out so much further. And then basically what that does is, as your fuel comes up in from the transfer pump, when it goes into its injection process, as it's spinning, these little cam followers will come in like this, and when they come in to compress, it actually compresses the fuel and pushes it back out these ports here. So you can see if it's all the way out like this, you can get that much more fuel in there, versus if it's all the way closed like this, you can't get near as much fuel. Probably have to be a little bit careful how high you turn it up. In diesels, if you get too much fuel and not enough air, everything gets really hot, and then you'll start melting stuff. But in this case, this thing was set pretty low, so we're going to turn it up just a little bit because the customer requested it. And yeah. All right, so we're back in the shop, and got all the new injectors here. All the tips were bad on these, which is the part that's covered with the little black thing. We just had a local company rebuild that stuff for us because they have the proper equipment to check pop pressures and all that stuff. I mean, I'm sure I can buy a cheap kit on Amazon or something, but it's just easier to have them do it. But before you go ahead and put the injectors in, you have to clean the bottom of the cup. You see where all that dirty carbon and shit is. You gotta clean all that up before you put it in, so otherwise this little copper sealing washer on the bottom here will not seal, and then you'll basically have compression that's blowing out of the hole. So I just have I've got a little injector seat cleaning kit. Comes with a bunch of long Q-tips to get down in there and all sorts of different sized brushes. I generally try and do everything by hand, you know, unless I know for a fact it's a stainless cup, just so you don't get too aggressive. I mean, all you have to do is clean it. So we'll get all those cleaned up and then pop those injectors in there. All right, so this is that back fuel plate that I was telling you guys about before that I had forgot. So this just bolts on to the back of the fuel pump. I'll show you in a minute here. So it's going to go on right there. You can see where that little tit is, or that little insert. That little tit will go right in there, and it bolts on just like that. And then this fuel line here is the supply for this. So this is actually a pretty crucial component of these style injection pumps because believe it or not, all these little pieces fit inside of that. So the first thing that goes in the bottom there is this little spring. It's really tricky to get in there because you can't let it sit sideways like that, and it will fit in sideways. It has to sit up and down like so. The next thing you got is this here, and I guess this is another kind of metering valve basically, and you can see it's got two little holes in it, and basically what it does is those little holes kind of line up with there. And this spring, first of all, keeps this off the bottom of that little housing, so it'll sit like that, and it keeps it off the bottom, because then this little piece here will actually ride inside of this. Okay, so it rides inside of there, and basically what that does is that'll flow back and forth, and the fuel pressure coming in will unseat that from the bottom here. So basically this hole, the fuel will come out here, and that's basically kind of like your priming mode, I guess, if you want to call it, and that will help prime the injection pump. And then when it unseats it fully, it comes out this one. I might have it backwards. This one actually might be your priming, and this one might be your run. Either way, the fuel pressure will come in, and it unseats that little piece in there. And so these will actually cause a no start, because as you can see, this one's kind of sticky because of all the water that was in it. If this gets stuck, it will actually cause the tractor to have a no start issue. So we're just going to run some emery cloth through there and then clean that up really good, It's just got a little screen which catches any debris that the filter won't catch, which we've got a new screen here and a new little fiber washer on the bottom. So yep, we're going to go ahead and run some 600 grit through that, clean it up really good, and then when I put it back together, I always like to put some kind of a lube on it to help with starts. There's no dry start or nothing, and I just put that PB Blaster. Will work great. You can use whatever you want, but that's just what I do. Anyway, let's get her done. Alright, well, we got everything back on. Got the pump back on and all hooked up. All the injectors, new injectors are in it now. Do all sealing washers on the return line. Got the front cover bolted up there. And then I went and I took apart every fuel line in this thing since I had water in it, blew them all out, brake clean and air. Cleaned out the separator bowl. The only thing I got to do yet is I got to get a new transfer pump for it. I cleaned it out, but it's leaking between here yet, so I'll get one of those this week and then throw it on, put a brand new filter on it, and yeah, now thing fires right up. So and this is obviously the kill lever, which runs that lever there. I've already tested a couple times, shut it off, and you can fire it right back up. So that means that that metering valve is not sticking. So there you go.